Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching The Kevin Moore Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. And on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Jonny Enoch. Now, Jonny is a UFO researcher, author, clinical hypnotherapist, and founder of metaphysicalsource.com and resides in Vancouver, Canada. Now, having gone to school for addiction counselling, computer science, and alternative healing, he has always had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. Not only has he been researching metaphysical and extraterrestrial phenomena for over 15 years now, his other interests include cosmology and dimensional ecology, sacred geometry, natural healing, and vegetarianism. Now, currently he's writing a book on ancient consciousness technology and new ways to make extraterrestrial contact. Jonny Enoch, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is wonderful to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on. I know we've got lots to speak about. I came across you when I think you recently did Coast to Coast recently.
Yes, I was on Coast to Coast with George Norrie. It was such a fun show.
Yes, I hadn't, to be honest with you, I hadn't come across you before, but I'm so glad I watched that episode because you're a fascinating guy. How long have you been into sort of researching these subjects of the esoteric, the unknown, channeling, and all sorts of subjects that you've been looking at?
Well, the short answer is that I've been doing this research and gathering it and collecting it up for over 20 years. But the longer answer is I've been doing it all my life. And it's been a lifelong fascination for me. It started when I was very young. I was having strange experiences around the house, out-of-body experiences, and going to other places and looking down at myself, lying in my bed, very similar to what's behind me today. And I was looking for answers, but I couldn't find them anywhere because I grew up in a very religious home where there was sort of an information embargo on this sort of stuff. So I like to joke that when other boys my age were hiding Playboys under their bed, I was hiding esoteric and occult books under my bed. And if I wanted to see the Playboys, I had to go to their house to see them. But otherwise, this sort of research has been building up for years and years. I started to look into psychology and counseling. I went to school for that and working with clinical hypnotherapy. And my research into the mysteries has taken me all over the world, looking into ancient temples and, investigating these things and everywhere I could look. And they've just led me on fascinating adventures.
And of course, how many years would you say you've become a sort of, would you call yourself a full-time researcher? Is that a title that you would call yourself?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a truth seeker, full-time researcher, and investigator into the mysteries. At least 20 years, I want to say, in this area, doing gathering these papers and evidence. I have, if you were to look over into the various other rooms here, I have literally those bankers boxes. I have boxes after boxes of case files and studies and notes from different sessions I've done, not only during clinical hypnotherapy sessions I've had with people that have had life between lifestyle regressions, as well as ET contactees, and gathering up strange information. But it's a lifelong obsession.
Now, when you talk about the hypnotherapy, is that something that you've been doing?
Yes, absolutely. It's something that I added to my toolbox because I've had my own experiences, which have been absolutely fascinating, and encounters with what I would call the unknown. But I just started to see a pattern when I looked at all of our religions and our ancient symbolism. And there's a story on our planet that I believe that reveals an ancient consciousness technology. And that story begins with us and who we are or where we come from. And I believe that's the most fascinating story of all.
Oh, that's a fascinating way you put it, a consciousness technology, as in the sense, I'm guessing you mean in the sense that the abilities that we have inherent within ourselves, to communicate with other parts of ourselves, in be it multidimensional realities or other parts of our soul, or however you want to term that. You're not talking about suppressed technology. You're saying that we are the technology.
Absolutely. And if we knew who we were, we would never doubt ourselves again. I mean, we are just absolutely fascinating and powerful beings. Each one of us is precious. Each one of us watching this today is capable of more than we even imagined or ever dreamed of. And I believe our destiny is in the stars. As a collective, we're doing great things, and we're going to continue to do them. But first of all, we have to realize who we are.
What's driving you right now to do this subject or to do these subjects? What's the push?
Well, it's my belief that when you go down this rabbit hole, the deeper you go, the weirder it gets, and it's a thirst that you can't quench. It's like once you find out, you get some breadcrumbs are part of the mysteries. It just keeps drawing you in deeper and deeper, and it's more fascinating and more beautiful the further you go. So, for example, when I was working with someone who's an ET contactee that has had these incredible experiences where they had missing time or they couldn't remember certain details, it's like that experience is outside of the outside of space-time. It's all happening in simultaneity. So as they're talking to me, the being that they're interfacing with them back then is also talking to me through them. And also they're relaying very, very particular details, which is very, very fascinating to me, that that we believe that we live in, which really is nothing more than a series of neurological and physiological discharges, and it's being decoded for us. It is not what we think it is. It is here for us with the universe as like a machine to grow and evolve souls. And that's the whole reason time exists. The illusion of time is just so we can measure our experiences. So once we understand in a greater capacity what consciousness is, and consciousness is a non-local awareness, there's a non-locality factor to it. Once we understand what that is and who we are, there's a beautiful unfolding to all of this, and I think it gives life more meaning.
Absolutely, it does. No, that's some deep stuff that you've said there. So I'm fascinated with the hypnosis. So where did you learn to do that technique? What technique are you using, and how many people have you sort of regressed as well?
Well, yeah, I've worked with countless people and coming to me. But first of all, what people have to understand is how hypnosis works. Now, a lot of people think that when we say hypnosis, because we go back into the word hypno, which we think means to put someone to sleep, it's more of a heightened state of awareness. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of different myths and ideas about hypnosis. So I went to school for hypnosis, and to not only get a master hypnotist certificate. Then I went in to get the clinical hypnotherapy training, and I went through that process. But with that, how it works is this, is that when you and I are talking, or you're talking to someone on the street, your brain waves are oscillating at a higher level. They're in beta or hyper beta mode, okay? So when you're watching television or you're reading a book, and someone might say to you, "Hey, Kevin, what are you doing?" And they're trying to talk to you. You might turn around and go, "Huh? What did you say?" You might not have fully registered what they were saying because you were in a light alpha state. So then when you go into, you start to fall asleep in your bed, you're slipping theta. And when you're at your most profound, deepest level of sleep, you're in delta. So it's very interesting that when you're growing up, for example, and you're a kid, from 0 to 5 years old or so, you're at that level of brainwaves, which is in the delta. Now, Kevin, did I lose you, or do I still have you there?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I noticed that our video was glitching. So when you're when you're at that 0 to 5 years old state, you're at the delta state, which is that more profound, deeper level of like sleep state that we have our brainwaves in. So this is very interesting that you get a lot of kids, for example, when they're growing up, start getting these past life memories, as we've heard about with Dr. Jim Tucker over at the University of Virginia. So they're recalling these deeper level, almost like soul memories. And then when you move up, you're getting a little bit older. You're going into your theta state, and as a teenager, you're fluctuating through all your brainwave states until you level out as an adult. And there's no doubt this is why teenagers kind of act a little unstable at times within their moods and their patterns of thinking. So this is a very interesting process because we know consciousness works like an onion. We know it has layers, different layers of you can be aware that you're aware, that you can be aware that you're aware that you're aware. And it's very interesting that when you want to go and you want to do regressions on people, let's say you're trying to find out if they have a traumatic memory that they're trying to heal from their childhood, or they're trying to go into what we would call a past life memory or a soul memory or one of these experiences, you might have to go into a deep alpha or a light theta state. And to do that in hypnosis, you would use something called an induction. So the induction works on people in different ways to bring their brainwave state down and kind of slow it down and to kind of watch their body. And a good hypnotist, one that's trained, will actually look at you and tell physiologically with your eye movement or your skin changing in different areas that they'll test with your body to see if you're in that proper state, because you're in a heightened state of awareness. Now, where some people come into problems is they say, well, I can't be hypnotized. That's not me. You can't hypnotize me. Well, you're always being hypnotized, actually, through subliminal suggestions, through advertisements, through a constant bombardment we have of symbolism and words. And how it works in hypnosis is that when you sit down in the chair in that office, the process has already begun. The practitioner is already building a rapport with you. When they're asking you how your day was, and they're asking if you like sports or whatever it is, they're building a rapport with you. That process has already, been started to build a bridge with you to have that connection. And then they're listening to what you say. So, for example, Kevin, if you were to tell me that you could, imagine that what I was telling you, I imagine that sounds very good, or I see what you're saying. I would put a V down on the piece of paper that says that you are a visual person. If you were to say that, oh, that feels good to me, Johnny, or that doesn't that doesn't feel very good to me in that regard, I would say, okay, an aesthetic, a feeling person. If you said that doesn't sound very good or that sounds awful, I would say that you're an auditorial person. Maybe you would have a little bit of both. So these would be sort of the induction words or commands a person would use to kind of put you into that right state to be customized or tailored for you. And then from that process, it's like unlocking a key and opening up Pandora's box. And the mind is a wonderful playground, and there's incredible things that you can do from there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And okay, so you spent a number of years, was this a sort of part-time course that you did for the regression hypnotherapy work?
Yeah, no, this was something that I was doing pretty regularly for a while there. I don't do this work as often anymore because my research has taken me more into other areas, exploring temples around the world and looking at our ancient history and symbolism, but I believe it's all connected to consciousness. It's something that's very important. It's something that I feel is deeply integrated into every area of our religions, of our ancient mysteries. So most certainly this is something that it's a part of us that we can't get away from. I think for me, the most, I would say the most exciting area of this work that I ever did was working with Dr. Michael Newton's Life Between Life protocols.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with him?
Oh, of course. Famous.
Yeah, now I'll tell you, that work is extremely exciting, but it's very, very exhausting. So, of course, for your listeners who might not know who Dr. Michael Newton was, he was a PhD behavioral psychologist, and he didn't believe in any of this stuff. And he had a client that came in complaining of a psychosomatic pain in their leg. He used Ericksonian clinical hypnotherapy with them, did a regression, and finds out that they have a memory from a battlefield. Of course, being an amateur historian, is able to cross-reference all the facts and get the information that, okay, this looks like it was a legitimate case, coming from like a sort of a war injury, sort of starting this. This unravels all of his work into then thousands of cases where he discovers that people have a memory of what it's like to die, to pick your body, to belong to a soul group, to go through this wonderful, wonderful process of the life and death cycle that we all have memories of. And doing this work was so incredibly rewarding. I think I even have some notes from certain cases I've been working on over here still that I was recently referencing. And when people are going through this, it's absolutely incredible where they can see where the loved ones in their lives played a role, why they chose their life, what it was like to pick their bodies, you're interfacing with their spirit guide through them, and that we go through a council of elders or council of wise ones process. And my God, it's the most fascinating thing. But I tell you, Kevin, if you're sitting there doing this work for 5 hours straight and you're sitting up in your chair, it's very intense, very time consuming, but the most rewarding work ever.
Yeah, I mean, with any of this work, be it the regression therapy or, as you were describing there, Michael Newton's work, or any of even the research work that you've done into the UFO subject, how does it change people to improve their lives in the moment now, do you think?
Well, what people have to remember is that when we look at this process, that I think that what fascinates me about the mind is that our mind can be a wonderful servant of us, but it makes a terrible master. So the Madame Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, said the mind is the great slayer of the real. And so with that, a lot of us hold on to a lot of deep fears and regrets, and we hold on to a lot of pain, and we hold on to, let's say, an old memory where we might feel very bad about something we did in the past, or we hurt someone, and we might think we having a problem erasing that or getting rid of that. But actually, so one of the good things that we get from religion, let's say if we go into Catholicism, for example, there's something called the act of penance, where you can dedicate a good deed to the memory of a bad deed, and you can erase your mistakes through that, and you can learn that there's ways that we can kind of fix things and reprogram them. And I really believe that if we nurture the mind and we look at it as a great garden, like the Zen Buddhists say, the Zen garden, we can really have a wonderful and more fulfilling life.
Yeah, I think I love these subjects, right? And, I've been doing them since 2008, September 2008, interviewing people on these subjects. And I don't know, I must be in a different stage of my life right now. I'm not sure. I almost feel like I want to move on to subjects that are more acceptable for people and to help people on a larger scale. My thing with some of these subjects sometimes is that I feel restricted. Do you know that? I feel restricted that, I really want to help people awaken, but it just feels like it's such, it's meant, this type of work is only meant for a certain audience. Have you ever had that experience or those feelings?
Well, we do get into that box where the genre or this information has been restricted in the past, but a lot of people view this information as infotainment. And I just spoke at a conference just a few days ago, actually. It was a wonderful conference called The Architects of the New Paradigm, and George Norrie was there because you just mentioned him, and a whole bunch of really wonderful speakers. But at the conference, I said to people at the end, I said, look, don't just look at this as a bunch of silly facts. I mean, these are some really cool facts I'm giving you about archaeology and the mind and mythology and strange ideas. But at the end of the day, I want this information for everybody to think about it, and how does it cause us to look on ourselves and take greater responsibility for ourselves. For example, if we're talking about UFOs, this is where if we want to become greater citizens of the universe and interface with these beings, let's become greater citizens of the world first and take care of ourselves and become the greater caretakers of this planet. Let's become more loving and more kind. So that's what we really have to do with this information. But let me tell you something, Kevin, this is the exciting part. This is the cutting edge. This is the future of our science.
That is
and
true.
You are one of those pioneers that's going to be there. What used to be called the ideas of quacks and charlatans, talking about dimensions and different states of being and all that. That's what we're discussing in our theoretical physics.
But you come across quite grounded with it all. And you are right, and I saw that in your other interviews as well. You remind me of a kind of a Richard Dolan, but more open to other subjects rather than just having a set truth on just one avenue. Which there's nothing wrong with that. I respect Richard Dolan, but
thank
I'm just
you.
saying.
I want to say thank you though, because I love Richard Dolan. We spent some time talking this last few days, and we were hanging out, and I absolutely love him.
Yeah, no, I do, but I mean, I do, and I do like his thinking. I mean, obviously you cover all sorts of subjects. What do you think of the secret space program whistleblowers and that type of angle of this work as well?
Oh, it's a very real subject, absolutely very real, and we've had people talking about this for years. I mean, it's not a new it's not new that we see guys coming out saying that they were a part of the secret space program. I always go back to that incredible day, May 9th, 2001, at the Disclosure Project at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., when Dr. Stephen Greer was out there with 22 major whistleblowers, and they were standing in front of an audience full of reporters. And a lot of people don't know a couple facts about that day. But, for example, we had the great legal genius of the great constitutional lawyer Daniel Sheehan, who I just drove him home to the airport. We were having some amazing conversations a few days ago. Just an amazing person, all the stuff he's done. But everybody was able to break their secret oaths that day, or at least they thought, because Daniel was there, which was amazing. But on that day, we had Sergeant Clifford Stone come out and shock the audience. Now, here's something, Kevin, that I don't know if you know this, and maybe your listeners might be surprised to hear this, is that on that day, Dr. Greer did not want Sergeant Clifford Stone to come out with the information he did because it was too shocking and too out there. But Cliff Stone did it anyways, and he shocked the whole audience to the point where their mouths were dropping when he told that audience that day that when he got out of the military, that he had interfaced with over 57 species, and that, well, some of them might be what we call the grays. Most of the ETs that he had encountered looked just like you and I. They were bipedal. You could be walking in a room with them, and you'd never know that you're in the room with ETs. And the only thing is that they're more evolved in many ways than us. Not only consciousness-wise, but in their bodies are more evolved in some areas, so that they could walk into a dark room, for example, be able to touch an object, know what color it is without looking at it, or they might have a heightened sense or taste. And just really quickly, just to throw this in, Sergeant Major Bob Dean, who's one of my heroes, just an amazing figure in disclosure. He said that when he was stationed at SHAPE, or Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, and NATO in the summer of '63, he was totally shocked, and his entire life was changed before him when he discovered a top secret military document, government document, that said that we had been visited for thousands of years by extraterrestrials, that they were peaceful. If they wanted to take us over, they could have a long time ago, but they didn't. And that they were not only interplanetary, intergalactic, interstellar, but also multidimensional. And so he said he had to break his top secret cosmic clearance oath as well to bring this information out. But we've been told for years that our militaries have had cooperation. And I've had the former Canadian Defense Minister of Canada, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, and others that have confirmed for me that we have extraterrestrials working on our military bases with scientists, and that our governments are doing this. But if the public knew about this, it would just shock them. So this is very, very real. I've been hearing this for years by very credible people.
You know, and some of that could be true. I'm just finding it hard nowadays to, go down the road of, I've had, contact with multiple species. And I've been out of space, and been on off planet. I find that really difficult. I find that very difficult. I mean, there's never no proof, of course, but then there's a balance for me where if I'm currently making a documentary on channeling, there's no proof on that either, right?
Well, you got to look at replicable data and the information that with channeling, you'd look at the information and see.
Well, of course. How does it make? Does it make a difference to you? How does it make you feel? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel like you're something more than you was before you heard it? Does it make you Is it helping you to go forward and make a difference in your life and and change something about yourself? But with the whistleblowers. I don't know if it's doing more harm than good to the community. I still haven't made my mind up sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's like it says in the Bible. It says, "By their fruits you shall know them." So I think that when you get somebody that comes out and they're selling a story and they're making all kinds of outlandish claims, if they're setting themselves up to be somewhat of a messiah figure, I think then you got to go look back at that and say, okay, is this a self-serving agenda? But there are people that have been contactees that have had some very credible stories that are really quite remarkable, that they tell you them and they'll blow you away. A good example of that is there's a wonderful series by Albert Rosales, and it's done by his publisher Ash Staunton. It's called The Humanoid series, and it's really quite remarkable, the work that they've done, gathering up all the contactee stories and abduction stories that you'll ever get through all the years and putting them into a wonderful collection of books. Shameless plug, it's on Amazon, but I got books over here, and before that, for years, I was scouring through these cases trying to get them. I was like, thank God someone did all the work and put them together. But you find many incredible stories, and they're very similar. And a good example I would give you, since you're a guy that's fascinated by the mind, you look at these things, and I'm definitely fascinated by the theories of quantum consciousness, the mind, and how it works neurologically with the brain and everything else, how we process information. You look at these cases that they've done with psychedelics, drugs, for example. People have used dimethyltryptamine or DMT, which we're told that functions alongside the pineal gland. Now, it's interesting on these case reports and studies that people look at, where you get these reports of people discovering what they call machine elf entities, and these complex geometrical shapes and patterns and strange settings from an ontological perspective. And when you see these case reports, they're very similar in different places in the world of different intelligences and people and beings and stuff that they encountered. So it seems like some of these reports most certainly have a pattern that is indicative of something significant. So I think we have to look at the data and compare it from that.
That is true, but when a story is too far-fetched and it goes into the unimaginable, or the just blowing your mind away with things that don't, are just over the top, that's when it's like, well, is that really true? And what is that person suffering from to say such things? I think there is a little bit of that. There's quite a bit of that going on from even the other hosts that are out there in this field, and from the people that they're bringing on as well.
I try to be careful when I look at this information to kind of screen it and look at it very carefully. For me, I see most certainly there's a connection into our ancient history to a lot of very strange patterns and mysteries and ancient secrets. But there's some stuff out there that I've heard some theorists come through with that is too much for me at times. And so, what I try to do is I try to keep an open mind, and
yes.
I try to put it through various screening capabilities.
I just don't know what it's doing to the community that I really cared about. I just don't know what it's doing. And when I listen back to old interviews, like Art Bell was a guy that inspired me to do my talk show, right? Never got a chance to meet him or talk to him. But, there was a guy that I felt was, grounded in his approach to an interview, and wouldn't, if it seemed to go too far-fetched, he would kind of bring it back, or at least try to, bring it to some normality. And I think I just think that there's a bit of damage that's been done to our community, unfortunately, and we don't have a regulatory body looking after us that some others do as well. And I think
that's what Richard told me. Richard told me at this event when we were talking a few times, because I love talking to Richard, and so he said to me that he protects the community. For him, he's a scholar. He's a brilliant scholar. Yes. He's very objective in that area and likes to pull things apart. And for him, he's defended this community and brought the information to the front many times. And I think that we all owe him a great deal of gratitude for that, because there have been folks over the years that do that. When they come out with it, then the people that were on the fence, of the skeptics, people that are more open-minded to look at the evidence, that they wanted to see it from all angles, they got a little discouraged when someone was saying there was some blood-sucking parasite that came down to the roof and attached itself to someone and probed them or something. I don't know. Some of these stories I've heard over the years are very interesting.
Right. Yeah. Or I've been to Mars. I mean, I haven't left the solar system, and I haven't left the planet, so I can't say whether that's true or not. But it's as bad to me as saying that the Earth is flat or we didn't go to the moon.
This is the thing. I think it's good that we most certainly scrutinize these things with our logic and our reasoning and whatnot. But the one admonishment that I would give us as we start going into this topic, because I've talked to some people who are very serious behind the scenes that don't come forward, and there's a lot of things I've heard that are not are not ready to be heard yet. But from what I've heard, there are some things that are very, very shocking out there, and it's going to be. There's going to be a lot for us to wrap our minds around at times, but it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be fascinating. I'm looking forward to the journey. And I would say to people as an admonishment, not to be too pragmatic in our thinking. And I'll give you an example with that, is that recently I was pulled out to see a documentary that was a faith-based documentary about aliens. And in the documentary, it was incredible how they said, well, we're clearly not getting visited by extraterrestrials because we can't go past the speed of light, and we'll never get past the speed of light. We can never leave this solar system. It's impossible. I think that's very pragmatic. That's like going back and saying, we'll never fly. We'll never get the airplane. We'll never do this. We'll never do that. It's very limited in that type of thinking. Furthermore, they say, from the faith-based perspective, they were saying that these were extraterrestrials are clearly just demons impersonating extraterrestrials, and it's a very geocentric perspective, that there could be nothing outside of our Earth sphere. We're at the center of the universe, kind of thinking. So it is it's very interesting on that level. But like what you said, though, there are some theories out there that make us scratch our heads. So we have to be open-minded, but at the same time, we have to use our logic and reason at the same time. Yeah.
Well, my biggest fear for this community will be when the born-again Christians start accepting the ufology and mixed messages of the Bible get involved in this work as well.
The whole Bible is there's so much incredible information in there that leads us to believe that there could be extraterrestrial stories. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story in Ezekiel about the cylinders within cylinders that come down. I mean, my God, if that's not a description of one of these ancient flying machines, which I have some theories about flying machines sometimes, if you want to hear them, that go back into ancient India and the Vedantic writings. But when we look over at the book of Ezekiel, it says, here's cylinders within cylinders coming down from the heavens with sparkling, bright, metallic, shining rims with thousands of blinking eyes. Yeah. And it comes down, which sounds like blinking lights. It lands, and these humanoid-like creatures come out. And I'm thinking, I don't know. That kind of sounds a little bit like a UFO to me.
It does. It does. I just think that, having interviewed so many channelers and sort of been doing this journey for a while, I think consciousness plays a game with us, and it doesn't actually show itself fully, or whatever these interdimensional beings are that you've brought through hypnosis, and other people have brought through, like the Betty and Barney Hill story, and so many abductees, the Travis Walton story, stories that really, the Travis Walton went missing. Do you know what I mean? If you want a case that it actually shows a genuine case, look at Travis Walton. And obviously he's been affected by that case. I don't think he's the same man right now at all.
Could be Strebers.
Yeah. Well, look at Strebers, exactly. Yeah. So the UFO subjects of whatever this ET experience is, it may not be what we even think it is. It may be part of the multidimensional universe. It may go way beyond nuts and bolts and way beyond just being visited by planetary, beings from other planets. It's something much larger.
It's all of the above.
It could be as well.
Yeah, we're getting all of the above, and that's the exciting part about where we are right now. And going back to what Bob covered, the different types of extraterrestrials, even the Kardashev scale that Dr. Michio Kaku regularly references, that was discovered by Nikolai Kardashev, that we have different types of civilizations. I think it's in our natural progression and our unfoldment and evolving in the future that we are going to evolve to higher capabilities. And that's where I think when we look in our ancient histories, and it doesn't matter where you look, Kevin, if you look at the Assyrians, the Akkadians, the Phoenician Canaanites, or any of these ancient groups that we look at, even in ancient Egypt and whatnot, we have a lot of winged gods and depictions of individuals here. And I'm not going to go too far out there on the ancient alien stuff, but I just want to say that we do have depictions of gods and visitors, and it would appear that, even going back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, that we have had this greater unfolding where the wild man has had a bit of an upgrade. But we've been mixing and we've been matching, and maybe that there was a greater capabilities given to us in our involvement at this stage, but have we mistaken some of our visitors that have come here as spiritual entities? that we've mistaken them as that because of their higher evolved capabilities and maybe their technology. And in the Bible, it says in the book of Hebrews in the Bible, not to quote your favorite book, but it says in the Bible, it says, that you should be, it basically says that you should, show, you never know when you're dealing with strangers that you should be courteous to them because you might actually been in the presence of angels, that they might have been visiting the earth. And what is an angel? An angel comes from a Greek word from angelos, meaning message. So we know that they're almost mentioned ubiquitously in every culture around the world. So who knows what our real
and I think when we get into what I call the stories that are very negative, but negative ET entities, or it's they abductions are ongoing, or the people that go missing are part of have gone into some sort of slave program and all this kind of stuff. I've just gone past that stage of seeing it so negative. I don't think it is. I think it's a lot more positive. And I don't think these beings are that negative as well. But I mean, there's a lot. People love fear. People love negativity. There's never a solution. It's them against me. They're the bad guys, and they don't want to see it any other way.
That's right. People love the fear porn, and they love looking at what could keep them up at night. It's like infotainment for them. But my take on it is that yes, there are some of these abduction stories that aren't so friendly and they sound scary. But I don't think that it was in those cases when we're talking about the Greys and whatnot, that I don't think it was done maliciously. I think that from them, maybe they didn't have the same level of empathy or sympathy for the people that they were doing these experiments on. And at the other hand, I also tend to think from what I've discovered is that there is an agreement on a higher level of consciousness, kind of like when we look at the subconscious or the unconscious mind. Yes. There's a higher agreement that we have with those beings, that if we see a UFO or if we've had an interaction, that we've almost had an agreement as souls, if you want to say on a soul level, not to sound too mystical and cosmic for your listeners, that we want to go through with that experience. So it's a very interesting thing, and it's actually quite a gift, and it unfolds stuff. And just really quickly also, during that recent documentary that I was dragged into, that was more of a Christian or faith-based documentary that was really done professionally, by the way, with even professional actors and the nice music and the special effects. And the whole point of the documentary was to pull on some cases where some guy woke up and I don't know if you've heard of an incubus or a succubus or something. Yes, he was having a bad sexual dream where he was he was getting probed by some mysterious being in his room, and this was a very famous case in the United States. And he said a religious or faith-based name for the being to go away, biblical-based, commanding it to leave. And then all of a sudden he woke up and his wife said, "Were you having a bad dream?" And he says, "Yes, I was being probed." So then they started to say, newspapers started covering this, and these fellows in this documentary were saying, well, then obviously this all must be these evil spirits that are visiting people. And I think that is, again, very pragmatic and to one perspective. And I don't even know if what we were looking at there is an extraterrestrial, or is that some sort of a bad dream that he was having. But, there's these type of ideas about what our visitors are and who they are. I think if you look at the overall message, what the contactees are saying, there's a general theme there. They are, for the most part, not trying to overtake us. It's a message of peace. It's a message of greater responsibility, of environmentalism, of being more loving, kind, and they want us to evolve. And that's what I've taken away from this, and I think it's more on a positive level for our destiny.
God, I'm so with you on that. I'm so with you. Well, like I say, you get the born-again Christians, the religious side in there as well. One, they've got more money between them all to make bigger movies, and it pays more as well, and it looks more glamorous because of that money backing it. And that fear porn will just sell. I'm glad you used that word, fear porn, as well, because that stuff gets a much bigger look in than the light does most times, because that's just where we're at right now. I would say it must be part of our evolution. It must be. But I think not to address it, right, is the wrong thing. I find a lot of hosts don't want to address it, and after going to contact in the desert and having that experience at Alien Con as well, it's an industry, There's some of that are at the top of the echelon, as I call it, are the main people that are peddling a lot of fear, and I would say there's about 20% truth in a lot of these conferences. I have to go in there.
Yeah, it's very strange. There's so many different perspectives.
I sound so negative, don't I?
What's that?
I sound so negative right now, but it's what I've experienced.
No, it's okay. You're just being a good journalist, and that's what you got to do. You got to look at this information from every angle. It's dangerous when people start setting themselves up as a messiah figure, and I think that's what a lot of the ETs that I have discovered through people's cases, that they don't want that. A lot of the more of these groups, they don't want to have someone come out there and to have people worship them or look at them a certain way, because according to some of these ET cases, they say that hasn't worked out too well when they've been interfacing with other civilizations and other groups. Of what, if we are to believe what the information coming through is that they are waiting for us to do this on our own, that no one's going to save us, that we're at a very critical point of our evolution in our society and how we are. And I do think that in some way we are influenced by our movers and shakers through other themes in the universe. Now, whether that's coming through the extraterrestrials or whether that's coming through what I call the cosmic record, this is something I was just lecturing on, that I believe that this is a very interesting phenomena that we start to see, is that there is this field of information or a cosmic record in our universe, that information comes to people in our world. We know that Nikola Tesla said his brain was only a receiver, and that there was a core in the universe that he knew existed, but he didn't know how it worked. You see this Srinivasa Ramanujan's giving us, string theory mathematics and advanced trigonometry that we still use today, and it came to him in dreams. He has no idea how it came to him, but it showed up. Your Walter Russells, or Rudolf Steiner's. Steiner developed anthroposophy. It's a science of consciousness of the mind to develop agriculture and all sorts of other means of our arts and medicine. And he gave over 6,000 lectures about that across Europe, wrote countless books. And let's not forget the great Edgar Cayce, over 14,000 readings. As you know, you're a guy that studied these things. I mean, not all of the stuff towards the end was, on point, but his medical stuff was fantastic. So there is a record of information. We get information in our world that's changing us, that is directing us in certain ways. And we also have simultaneous inventions that come in our world. So is that being broadcasted from somewhere? Are we getting that from other beings? Who knows? But we are evolving, and we do have an incredible destiny.
And I think that, with the positive stuff you're saying there as well, which you said a lot of positive and great things there as well, which I really appreciate. With just your work in looking at the multidimensional reality as well, I think that plays a big part in your work from what I've seen.
It most certainly does. And, this goes back to consciousness, though, because I've looked at the incredible science of Sir Roger Penrose, the famed British physicist, and when you look over at Stuart Hameroff, yes, who does anesthesiology work over at the University of Arizona in Tucson, they've looked at a theory called ORC-OR, or quantum consciousness, and how it works in the brain. And that your brain has sort of this microtubule system that's so well designed with compensational devices and like a girder system, like a cockpit for your consciousness to fit in the brain. And we know when they've looked at consciousness, they say, okay, that your consciousness is held together through something called quantum cohesion or superpositioning. And this is something I was just lecturing on as well to the event where I just was, that I was saying that, when we see how we can be held together as our soul or our spirit, we have a unique IP address that's us. And it's very interesting that when we ask, why haven't we heard from extraterrestrials, people always ask that question. And I believe there's a multidimensional and consciousness answer here, because we are multidimensional beings when we start to understand this. And the interesting thing is to find out the answer why we hadn't heard from extraterrestrials. I actually flew over to Arecibo, as I think you might have heard me talk about in my interview I did on Coast. I flew over to Arecibo, up to the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. It was a difficult day. It was very humid and hot. The GPS didn't work. Maps were awful. Any of the signs, but I finally made it up there. It's one of the largest radio telescopes in the world, where we know, of course, in 1964, Carl Sagan beamed out an incredible message with binary code over 25,000 light years away from here at a globular star cluster called M13. And I said to them, I said, come on, guys, you can tell me the truth. I'm your buddy. Why haven't we received a signal from extraterrestrials? Have we got an answer? Because they said, I won't tell anybody. It's been my experience, Kevin, that when you go to archaeological sites and places like ancient Egypt or Turkey or wherever you're going, that just have one answer for academia, then they have the real answer that you can get if it's off camera, sort of thing, right? So
right.
I go there and they tell me, no, we haven't got anything. I said, what about that Chilbolton radio telescope thing in 2002? There was a crop formation. It looked like it was an answer. They said, no, that's nonsense. So I was a little disappointed. I left out of there. But I started to realize how our consciousness was, tied deeply into this multidimensional reality as well as communication. And I believe I understand how the ETs communicate and why we haven't had an answer from them directly. According to Dr. Michio Kaku, he said that, we've only been looking about, 100 light years away across our galaxy for signals to see why we haven't had a signal from space. And we know the galaxy might be about 100,000 light years across, and galaxies are tens of millions of light years away. Now, granted, I don't want to confuse you or your listeners what we call how many light years certain things are away. I'm only going to drop you a hint right now that you need to look up something called redshift and see that science that we're using right now is actually probably going to go out the window in a few years. And they might be closer than we've actually been told. But anyhow, the interesting thing about that is that Dr. Michio Kaku says, okay, right now we are only looking for signals from extraterrestrials in the hydrogen frequency. The next is to look in laser. And then after that, we look in broadband style communication where the packets are being diced up into little pieces like we do with email, going back and forth. Our information is, from a more advanced civilization, that's what we would do. So right now, if you think about it, when we've been looking for communication, it's so limited. So lastly, what I'll say about this really quickly and how it relates to what you were saying is that if you go look down, at your desk right now in front of you, and you looked under a powerful enough microscope, you'd see it's in constant motion with these minute particles we'd see called atoms, right? So if you smash an atom, you're going to find that there is electrons whizzing around the nucleus. Inside of the nucleus, you're going to find subatomic particles like quarks, neutrinos, hadrons, leptons, and gluons, etc. So actually, through this, when we look at those principles we were talking about, like quantum cohesion or superpositioning, we know that like an electron there could be on the other side of the universe, but it's all held together. And not to get off on too much of a tangent, but then we could go look at the fundamental basics of space-time geometry and how that all works with the general theory of relativity. Anyhow, bottom line is that you're just like your energy is held together, and you have this sort of process through like a quantum cohesion. There is an IP address to you, Kevin, and there's an IP to us all. That doesn't matter where the hell you're located in this universe, that you have a very specific, there's a very specific kind of signal to you, a frequency. And this, I believe, is deeply connected into our multidimensional consciousness-based hyperdimensional communications, and I believe that there's a greater technology there that we're only beginning to understand.
I think that's amazing what you're saying there. Now, how do you deal with atheists? I mean, you must have come across them with your work. How do you deal with the debunkers who would just say, look, this is purely nonsense. It's just in the front lobe, all these ideas, and nothing else exists apart from the existence you're having in the present moment right now?
Yeah, so first of all, anything that has the A in front of it means without. So, like a Gnostic is someone who has gnosis or knowledge. So agnostic, without atheist, they have no theism. It's very interesting, because I think that our idea about what, first of all, when we go to, theo, like kind of like a theo is the most popular Greek name for, because it's like God, like the or theater, the God show. I think the idea about what God is changed for a lot of people from their perspective. And I think that for the atheist crowd, I think that we're at this really interesting point in our history and in our evolution, because we've had your Richard Dawkins types who have even made pro-ET comments, which is very interesting. We've had all these incredible challenge things. So God comes from a Germanic word like Gott or good. God is good. And I go back into what Einstein said when Einstein was asked about, do you believe in God? And Einstein said, you know, I don't believe in the God that's going to smite the Philistines for thee. But he says, I believe in Spinoza's God, the philosopher. He says, I believe in the God of law and order. So I think that there's not our idea about this God that's going to punish you for everything that's out there with a big long beard. That's that patriarchal figure. That's kind of changing and evolving to everyone realizing that there is a supreme being in the universe, so to speak. When we look at that God idea, when we open up to the idea of it being like the unified field theory in physics, that it is a part of everything and everyone. And so this idea that there is a greater universe that we all belong to, that there is this universal supreme force, is very, very interesting and fascinating when we open up our perspectives. I do think it's very interesting that a lot of our religious institutes are opening up these dialogues, and that's actually something that Daniel Sheehan and I were talking about. Very interesting ride. He's so wonderful and brilliant. He was telling me about the movements at the Vatican right now, and the opening up of the conversations about extraterrestrials, and sort of advancing many of these religious theories and reforming them, and to opening up to greater responsibility of love and acceptance. And so I think our role and whatnot are changing too. So I think the atheistic perspective is changing, and that type of mindset.
Well, I always find atheists to be some of the most spiritual people. They're caring about themselves, they're caring about others, they're loving to be around. They actually emulate just what it is to come from that spiritual perspective, which is always weird to me to see that in them.
Religion does not have the monopoly on venerable values.
No.
But and most certainly we can point to the Stoics and Stoicism and other great groups in history that have done all kinds of wonderful things. But the one thing I take with religion is that I strongly believe religion is a science, and it should be treated like a science. That what I've found is that I do believe there's an ancient consciousness technology. Really quickly, Kevin, I just want to mention there's a doctor called Dr. Boguslaw, and Dr. Boguslaw was a Catholic doctor, for example, that has gone around studying for a prayer and how that it could be measured empirically from an electromagnetic was the replicable results that people had with it. Moreover, we know that we go back into a lot of the Vedic writings of ancient India, like even when you look at the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Samarangana Sutradhara, and all these ancient texts, and most certainly the Hindu Upanishads, and many of these great texts, we see that there are texts through the Rig Veda that inspired many of our physicists, our Niels Bohr, Schrodinger's, whoever you look at. So these theories, which I believe many of our ancient religions have all been reinterpreted down through the Vedas. Just don't want to throw this one out there. Think about Abraham in the Bible, and then the Brahma, or the Indian Brahmin, and then his wife Sarah in the Sarasvati River. Just throwing that out there. A lot of these ancient writings have all come from the ancient Indian, Babylonian, the Egyptian, and passed down to us. And there's an ancient consciousness technology. There's a hidden language in our symbolism, and there's a beautiful start encompassing it, we're going to see that it is going to enhance every part of our sciences and past.
Absolutely. And I know we're almost at the bottom here right now, or at the top, shall I say, of the hour. When, obviously, with the UFO subject, we're always looking up, it's almost like, I'm fixated with them being our savior in a sense, or they know or can help us to get past some point that we're at. Well, contact is not happening on the masses. I don't believe in my lifetime I'll ever have contact as such, but that's just my truth. Right, I might. Right, I've had a UFO experience. I can't explain what it was. My whole family had it, so that's how I got into these subjects, or got into them, should I say?
It wasn't an accident.
No, not at all. But where in any of these subjects where we talk about secret space program whistleblowers, ufology, multidimensional stuff, or whatever we talk about, when does that go back to self? When does that go back to self-empowerment, about where we're at with our life, and taking self-empowerment and saying, well, no one's here to save me. I've got to do this. I'm here to be the best person I can be, or come from a space where I'm happy within my life, or to just go back within.
Well, it just goes back to that idea that knowledge is useless without wisdom. And you're going to have all sorts of experiences in your life, but we got to remember, even when you look in the French, that the word experience is the same word as the word So we have to go through everything and process it with our mind and our heart and our reasoning, and then say, how can I apply this knowledge into my life? How can it be worthwhile? Even if you have something very negative happen to you, or a problem happens to you, go directly at it and transmute it through your philosophy and your understanding. Understanding comes before interpretation. So with this, I really believe that from a subjective level, that these experiences that you had, even you seeing that UFO, were not an accident. And from what I've seen, there's a pattern in our lives. And if you look at the ripple effect, Kevin, ever since you saw that UFO, what happened? You started this show, you started sharing, you started looking at these things, you started traveling. It changed your life. So I would say that there was a very real reason it showed up to you, and you and many other people attract these sort of things to them because they need to have them happen.
And I'm guessing for yourself that the person that you were just even a couple of years ago, a lot has changed for you in the way that you see life now.
Oh, life is always changing me. Every time I take one of these trips or do one of these adventures, I go on these adventures and I want to investigate things. So, for example, one day I woke up and said, I'm going to Ireland, and I went all around Ireland and these areas looking up to see if there people were talking about fairies and leprechauns and all these sort of experiences. I said, I want to know if there's truth behind this. So I went to every town, every little pub. Looked for the Shaughnekeys and the storytellers, and I asked everybody. As soon as I got off the plane, the taxi driver on the way to the rental car place said, well, if you want to see a leprechaun, all you need to do is drink 12 pints of Guinness. And he says, one will show up to you. And he laughed at me. And people around Dublin were laughing at me, but I didn't care. It just kept going. And like I was saying on the show, I eventually ran into a gentleman named Sean Ryan at Leap Castle. And he revealed some very incredible things to me, and so did others, about the entrances to the Fairy Mount. And these people had very real experiences, very similar to our ET experiences of missing time and these fairy circles, like crop circles. Yeah. And I found a lot of similarities in many of those areas.
Now, your website is?
metaphysicalsource.com, and it is being upgraded right now and changed. So if you check it, there's always going to be new information on there.
Yep. Now, we've been putting your website on throughout this interview as a lower third. And
wonderful.
Yeah, one of the interviews I saw just recently on your website was with Grant Shawhauser.
Yes, that was. It's amazing. I interview a lot of people with near-death experiences. I'm very deeply fascinated by NDEs.
Oh yeah, well, aren't they a very grounded way for people who aren't really into these subjects to see that there's something greater going on with consciousness?
Oh yes.
Yeah, they're a very easy entrance in for people, I think.
Oh yes, so there absolutely is, and there's most certainly something to that. One of my favorite people in the whole world that I absolutely love is Daniel Brinkley, and his near-death experience story is among definitely my favorite.
He's based in Vegas, isn't he, right now? Yeah.
Yes, he is. Yes. But when you're in the room with him, I don't care who you are. You could be the biggest skeptic in the world. You step into that room with Daniel Brinkley, he is electric. Like, you get into the room with him and you actually feel like 1,000 volts, 10,000 volts just went through you, and you know there's something different. There's like a sparkle in his eye. The way he talks about his story, he's just got so much love and so much kindness. And when you see what he went through and what a lot of other people that before their NDEs, these experiences deeply transformed them on many levels. So I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, it's just amazing.
Another great person that was in your field as well was Dolores Cannon.
Yes, most certainly. And these people are pioneers in this work. I mean, they were out there for years working in this realm of consciousness and, digging deeper into the mind. And I think that's what we have to do, because, this experience that we're having right now that's all around us, it's something being processed on so many levels. We're multidimensional beings.
Well, Jonny, I just want to thank you for being so grounded in the way that you approach these subjects. That's really nice to see. And I just wish you all the success with expanding into this field and becoming, one of the biggest speakers in this field, because we need people like you that are grounded.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate that very, very much. And if you could ever help me with that, help bring me out to the UK more. I love visiting the UK, and that's where I want to speak more out there. That's my favorite place to visit. I love the history. I love the people. I love everything about it.
Who knows, man? Who knows? UK, Australia, and America. Around the world tour. Who knows, right? Who knows what the future holds?
You never know, man. But yeah, hopefully you get to come out here too.
I would love
to have you out here.
Yeah, it was meant to be one of my journeys on my documentary, but I couldn't get the visa because I just didn't have the time because I had to get back to the UK and So
you will.
Yeah, but one day I will. One day I will come over to Canada. Most definitely.
Yeah, you gotta come out here. I think you'd enjoy it. Come out to Vancouver. Give me a call. I'll show you around.
Most definitely, brother. Most definitely. Well, listen. Just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And have a wonderful day.